Hey, Daniel.
Hi,
It's good to see
Maisie.
you.
Good to see you too. It's been a
Well,
while.
I know life was a lot different back in February, but I'm excited to reflect on that time with you.
Oh, I think this is exactly what I needed too. Just remembering the last moments of normalcy and how wonderful it was for that to have been spent at Caldera. That's just so wild.
Well, first off, how are you now? And yeah, how are you right now?
I mean, that's a loaded question, right? I mean, like
It
I've been
is.
in Portland for the past since then, and just the escalation of everything, especially this past month, has been insane. And with on top of like my art making work, I'm an educator and an activist, community organizer, and so the response, my personal response and collective community response between COVID and the murder of George Floyd and the federal government guards in Portland, like it has only just like been escalated and like exponentially just nonstop. It's been insane and exhausting, but to some degree exciting, I guess. How I'm doing is an extremely exceptional situation, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you mentioned that you are an artist that moves between studio practice and education and community-based work. So I'm wondering if you could like cast your mind back to when you were thinking about applying for residency. Why were you feeling like you needed a residency? Why did you apply to Caldera? And then just if you could talk a little bit about your experience.
For me in my practice, I'm always responding to the most present sort of environment need in the moment on top of like making a living, which often looks like teaching first, then community organizing as that like active outlet, engagement, social life, all of that. And as a result, my studio practice always kind of falls by the wayside. Not having that for an extended period of time made me realize like how much I was suffering for not being able to like restore myself, like how restorative studio practice really is for me, to feed, and sort of recycle all of the emotional energy that goes into teaching and community organizing. And even if I did have studio access, which I didn't in the year leading up to Caldera, but even if I did have access to studio space, I just couldn't be in the headspace for it with all of these other things so active on my priorities and in front of my face. And so to be able to have the opportunity to like remove myself from my environment and be provided the opportunity to just focus on that studio work and have that be supported as the key priority, was phenomenal, and something that I couldn't do myself.
How do you think the residency impacted both your studio work and your teaching work?
Sure. And this might sound like, I don't know, like I think every artist struggles with self-esteem in some way, shape, or form. And so to have um, an established organization, institution recognize you and want to select you, to name you, and say like we to say that we want you to make your work, was is just so validating. And in some ways, I think being an artist is a struggle to like depend on that validation and just to find it for yourself. But my gosh, like having it come from a place like Caldera, like really sets the tone for, yes, like I'm in this because I can do this, and you're helping me do this means, like I said, all of that much. And then to also to come into this knowing what Caldera did for their youth programs, which aligned so much with what I was already doing as a teaching artist, and how, again, all of those practices inform each other. It's like I definitely bring my motivations in my studio practice into the classroom and the lessons that I teach, and then vice versa. It's this great kind of like open two-way, three-way street, really, even with community work. And so to be able to share that with the youth that I know were involved in Caldera and already had that kind of foundation built for them to be receptive to it was amazing. I don't typically get to work with that age group, much less like if I am, it's a school setting, in a classroom setting where so much other stuff is going on, and there's maybe like one or two students that would want to engage with it anyway and are being distracted by everything else in the moment. So to have a captive audience of people that were there, that wanted to be there and wanted to engage, was unheard of, really. And to have the space in tandem with my studio space and my practice was just the perfect kind of immersion for all of us.
Your teaching so beautifully brings together both, skill building in, ceramics, as well as sort of social emotional development for students. And so I'm wondering if you could reflect on that a bit, about why it's so important to support young people's creative development and social emotional development together, and maybe how you've seen that play out.
Yeah, and the more I reflect on it, the more I find it's really just about like being that age and being in a place of growing and developing and understanding ourselves and the world and how we interact with the world. And my role as a teacher or facilitator or whatnot is really more to like equip you with the tools and the vocabulary and methods to find that for yourself. I really try to steer away from a set curriculum by the book that you're expected to rise up to and be tested on, and you get a perfect score or not, or whatever. And as an art educator, it's more about equipping people with the tools and the resources and the confidence to look into themselves and find their way of expressing their feelings, and by modeling my methods as an example, not to be copied, but to inspire.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe it would be interesting for folks to hear a bit about how you do that, just so they can know a little bit about what would a class be like.
Yeah, I've learned so many fun approaches and kind of gimmicks or icebreakers and whatnot. And one of my favorite things to start off with is just like a copy my face game. It's just, let's just play with making facial expressions and copying my expressions and making your own and mimicking each other's, and then listing the vocabulary of like, how would you interpret these faces? What were these expressions? Happy, sad, scared, constipated always comes up. And then following that with like a mindful meditation exercise of like taking it out of the external face and like really reflecting inward. And it's like, how do you feel these feelings inside of you? Where do you feel it? Does it feel warm? Does it feel heavy? Does it feel sharp? Does it move? Does it sit still? And creating a safe place for you to experience that when you're not like in a heated moment. And then putting clay in your hands, and just through like, again, just warm up exercises. It's like, we're not going to keep anything we make. This is not about the final product. This is just exploring and sketching and the sensory experience with the clay, and then translating those feelings. It's like, what would happiness look like in clay, and really just transferring that from the inside through your body, through your hands into the clay. And again, facilitating a space where like, whatever you make, that's yours. And that's great. And nobody's is going to look the same. There's no right way to do it. Yeah. And then just kind of continuing to build from there. And the final product, if you will, I always like to do is a face mask, right? And then the kind of twist to it is that you can present one version of an expression on the outside that represents how you present yourself to the world, and then flip it over. And on the inside, you can create an example or representation of how you feel on the inside and how they can mirror or conflict or whatever that looks like for recognizing like the complexity of our emotions and expressions.
Hearing you talk and having seen your work, your studio practice as well, I'm guessing that what you're describing also comes into play in the work that you make in the studio. Could you talk a bit about that and how, these themes translate into other work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it draws so much from my own personal experience and my own personal struggles with finding how to express these really complex feelings that I have around my identity, my even like my sexuality, just all of those experiences. And we all experience the world differently, we all feel feelings differently. And to be able to, for me to connect with a material like clay and to represent those feelings, it's all very, visceral, bodily. I always use the example like, do you ever feel so anxious that your stomach is tied in knots? And so that's where those kind of representations come from, of these like soft organic forms under some kind of tension, or torque or contraction, and the way that we relate to it because of that recognition and sort of sympathy with seeing something that imitates the body but isn't fully identical to it. It's just an abstraction, but it still gets at that like, or that squishy feeling inside that you can't necessarily put words to, has always been kind of that ground of inspiration for me.
I want to jump back to the residency for just a minute. You were here with a cohort of other artists, and so I'm wondering if you could reflect a bit on that group of people and what impact they had on your experience and the community that you all built together.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it was just so lovely. And whether we independently as artists operate in our own spheres, and whether that's with other artists ourselves, to be able to be in community exclusively with other artists with their own practices and approaches, there's still that common love that we all recognize that we share with expressing ourselves and connecting with space and material and time and music and whatever it may be. On top of that, to know that we're all coming together under, for us, obviously, if I can say, it's like coming together under like being people of color, and knowing that somehow often works its way into being an artist, especially, is again that kind of validation and support and recognition that only fuels the motivation to make our work and put more of ourselves into it. And to have the chance to just spend time together too, whether it's in the studio or out in the beautiful nature. You say so well in your language, it's like whether you're here to make art or just to restore, like all of that time is valuable. And however we make use of that time is the relevancy of the residency. I think we all really felt that, whether we were working on the artwork itself or just being together.
Yeah, there's something that comes up for me hearing you reflect on that about cultural and social change and how building spaces, whether it's at Caldera or elsewhere, where people can come together in community and build community, work on creative practice, moves us towards a better world. I'm wondering I don't know, if you have any reflections on that.
Well, yeah, and for me in my studio practice and for what Caldera offered is really like a sanctuary, and it's like making artwork so deep and personal and vulnerable needs a level of safety that is really hard to find in our day-to-day lives. And so again, for us all to come together under that shared safety and sanctity.
Maybe what's the connection between supporting artists on their creative journey and how that supports maybe broader social change?
Well, and I always say too, being an artist is about finding your voice. And I think as artists, our voices are only valued in certain contexts and frameworks. And for a collective like the cohort to all be able to share and center and hear each other's stories and voices, kind of cements the recognition of the need for artists and artists of color, queer artists of color, the relevancy of those voices, you know, that are not necessarily a minority in that case, in this group. That then kind of instills itself back into the work that's made and the ability to exhibit the work. You know, the platform that Caldera offered to exhibit and to feature only then elevates the messages that are coming through in the work for change, for perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, and in that, I think what you were referencing open studios too, and you know that platform, which for your cohort and in your studio also had the young people that you were working with. So you offered them a platform as well to lead a workshop and be really out front and share their work and their voices. Could you, I don't know, tell us a little bit about that and maybe how you came to set that up that way and what the power is in having adult and youth artists together?
Oh yeah, yeah, that just like warmed my heart. You reminding me of that. That was so amazing. That was so much fun. Yeah, I did not expect it to take off as quickly as it did. But again, it just speaks to the youth that have that experience and groundwork. You know, like I was saying before, you know, I really enjoy kind of piecing together these small little exercises. And the point of exercises too is that like it becomes a routine. And with that practice, that's the point of it, right? It's not the end goal. It's what we learn from doing this practice. And I think with that, it was accessible enough to invite the students to contribute their own spin on it too, which was so much fun. And you know, I opened that space in our initial workshop together, just with us, and they just went with it and took it. And as soon as I opened the opportunity to share at the open studios, like they had it from there. I stepped back and I was just like, I'm just going to talk about my stuff. And I turn around and they're like hammering away at those little mini feeling sculptures. And I don't know how much of that was really, really me.
Well, you created the container for it for sure, and they felt supported in taking it on and running with it. It was really fun. And then the whole art, you know, all of the other kids who were there just with their parents attending the event got into it, and the parents did, everybody. It was wonderful. I'm wondering, I guess, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you want to talk about or yeah, share?
I mean, the other thing that, again, like just needs to be named too is the financial support that's offered just in being able to come to a space and reside there and use the equipment and materials, but then to be supported with our lives outside of Caldera in that time makes all of the difference. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I sometimes say, I honestly believe that capitalism is the enemy of art. And as soon as capitalism comes into the picture, it stops being art and it becomes a job. And I encounter that all the time with my life and my profession and my work. And to have that taken off the table basically really opened up the space for it just to be about art. And I couldn't be more grateful for that.
Where can people find you and your work online if they want to find out more about you?
Boy. It's funny too. I actually just recently changed my last name. There's a whole lot to it, but my website is my former name is Daniel J. Granius, GRANIAS.com. And my Instagram is new.danielgu, GYU is the new surname I've chosen for myself. So that's changed since I last saw you. So that's it for the most part. I'm currently trying to work on building my own shop, speaking of capitalism, because unemployment is also the thing. And I'm lucky that I now have access to a studio space, so I'm working on coffee mugs and flower pots, and I want to, and that is a choice, and I have chosen to enter that space and operate in that space outside of making artwork that doesn't revolve around that. So this is the world.
The residency program is going to be celebrating 20 years next year, and Caldera is going to be celebrating 25 years. I think it took someone and many someones having a vision for making a space for people and artists and creative people to come together. And then I think it took a further refining of that vision and being more specific and intentional about the artists that we wanted to support, who are working in community, working with young people, and really advocating for, as you talked about, the financial support in order to make that accessible for more artists. And so that's where we are now. And I hope that we'll be able to continue to refine that vision and make more space for people to come together in the way that you all did in the years to come.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And, I know we had a couple conversations about this too, and I've been trying and finding different avenues for pursuing what equity work looks like, especially equity in the arts and equity in art education. I'm grateful for the opportunity that was presented to me to be able to apply for the residency. And I know a couple people who have been involved in Caldera in the past that I think were part of that backstage work. Can you speak to any of that a little bit?
I mean, yeah, Caldera is on a journey, like so many other organizations, about our commitment to racial equity and building spaces that are safer, braver, and more accessible in every way for all types of people. And it's a continual examination of our practices, our intentions, our budgets, everything. And what is our foundation that we're trying to build this new vision on? And is it grounded in the values and intentions that we need to build the future we want to see for our artists, our youth, ourselves? And so I think it's, we're not there, but I feel like we are continually building community that is helping us get there. And so I'm excited for the journey. I'm excited to see how this program, all of our work will change over the coming years to build that more just world. So.
That's fantastic. Thank you.